Hello and welcome to the All Things in Common podcast. We are a podcast of conversations among friends on life, love, community, and the impact of the gospel. Each episode, we're going to have conversations about important topics of human flourishing and languishing, and how the good news of redemption can shape our perspective. My name is Wesley.
And my name is Christopher. I'm excited to be here today.
I am excited you are here as well.
Okay, I'm also excited you're here, I guess. I don't
No, hey,
know.
no,
One
it's cool.
half of the show, I guess, so I think I
That's
guess
right.
you need to be here.
Yeah, you can't be here if I'm not here, and I can't be here if you're not here. So,
Is that hard and fast?
no, I actually can be here if you're not here, cause I'm the one that streams it. But today we are going to be talking about, noticing the unnoticed is the title of the episode. Last episode we talked about the call of the church to care for the poor, but extends beyond that. I think we are called to be a welcoming place for anyone who needs a place to be, and especially those that might feel like they don't have a place to be, a place where they can feel belonging.
Yeah, that's right. Um, Obviously, there is not much argument that the church's call to the poor, whether we do it well or not, there's not
Mm-hmm.
much argument that it is, in fact, the church's call to be with the poor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where I think it will sometimes get a little bit tricky for some people is that uh, we are also called to the outsider, to the marginalized.
Mm-hmm.
And when we begin to see those people, whoever
Right.
those people are,
Mm-hmm.
for our friends who are listening to us, I'm air quoting, but I think you could probably hear it in my voice.
Mm-hmm.
Those people.
Those people.
I feel like I need a monocle when I say that. Those.
You need to be like holding a glass of Chardonnay.
The a
Oh,
sniffed
you're right.
of, a sniffed
This
of.
a fancy bourbon that's been aged for decades.
Those people. Do you realize we just lost our audience who wear monocles?
You're right. Apologies to anyone that wears a monocle. I know that's a bias that people hold against them. And I think it's unfair that monocles have been associated with the judgy elite.
Maybe it's just that they are not rich enough to buy both glasses.
That's right. Yeah. It's actually the opposite of what we're associating them
That's right.
with.
Um,
Anyway, it's harder.
Back on topic.
Yeah.
So,
I think Christopher's had a long day and he's getting out his
okay, back at it. Back at it. So, yeah. So whoever those people are, monocle or no monocle, uh, you know, we sometimes are not particularly happy with having them sit next to us, right?
mm,
Because everybody knows that each of us have our own particular places we like to sit. If
hmm
somebody's in our seat, we get a attitude. Listen,
yeah.
I have parking, right outside my house here, and I get upset when somebody parks in quote unquote my parking spot outside. I don't pay for that parking spot. That's the city spot. But I feel like I have ownership over that. But unfortunately, it's the same way, right? In some of our congregations where it's like, oh, that's my spot. Who does this person think they are? And then don't let it be somebody who is uh, not from our particular status group,
hmm
not from our club, not from our fill in the blank.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of ways that kind of sneaks in. I mean, just in general, like not just in like where I'm sitting, where's my spot? Because I get similar things. I'm in Pittsburgh, so I have street parking, and wherever you park is Yeah.
Wait a minute. Now,
Mm.
I lived in Pittsburgh, one of my favorite cities, if not my favorite city in the whole wide world.
Yeah.
What I will say is, in Pittsburgh, when there is a snowstorm and you've dug your spot out and you put your lawn chair in that spot, oh, that's your spot. I've seen people almost come to fisticuffs because of somebody trying to remove somebody else's lawn chair and park in their spot.
So the lawn chair situation in Pittsburgh, for people that don't know, people like there's a lawn chair rule, unwritten rule in Pittsburgh that if you put your lawn chair in the street, that is your spot. That's your parking spot. People can't take it. Um, I
Particularly when it's like dug out. I mostly
it
see it.
makes
I see it
more
in the summer,
sense.
but yeah.
It makes more sense if it's a dugout and from the snow spot. Makes a lot less sense on a block where there is no snow and it's completely clear and people just want to park in front of their own house when they don't own that space of land.
Mm-hmm.
Um and also I just, I mean it's similar, there are similar things of just yeah, like well what would it mean if I dug out a spot and let someone else have it? Which might actually, I mean that's a test of uh servant, like having a servant heart of just being like, yeah, like I did dig this spot out. I did have this spot and dug my car out of it and left, but if it means something that someone else who might be carrying groceries into the house might have a baby in the car or something like that, that means that they have an easier path to get home. Then great. Like I hope it's a blessing. Um, so, maybe there is a challenge to that
Mm-hmm.
theory. Uh, but back to the conversation at hand in the church, it's
Mm-hmm.
not just about my pew. It's not just about my space, my spot. It's also a my people. I think we can get a my people complex at the church, and I think we need to understand it's not the only reason this is my people is because it's God's people, and God has included me. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and
Who wasn't originally part of the family, by the way?
mm-hmm, grafted in.
Grafted in.
Yeah. So, which that is reference of Jesus, talking about being the vine and the branches that do not produce fruit get cut off, but um the non-Jewish people, because Jesus, like spoiler alert, he was Jewish, and his messiahship is through
Wait, Jesus was Jewish?
yeah, yeah,
Huh.
um, his messiahship is through the God of Israel and the chosen people of Israel. But we who are not Jewish, who are not Israelites, are still able to be included, grafted in, as in like a branch that doesn't belong to that vine is able to then be attached to it and become one with that vine. That vine being Jesus, the um, source of life that we have, which again is um, the incarnation of the God of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we are not a part of the people. We are only a part of the people because God has chosen to bring us in. And the branch isn't the one that attaches itself. It has to be attached.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in there of like our understanding of who we are, um, and how God has included those that aren't originally part of the quote unquote the in group, that aren't part of the people. Then who are we to like then sort of gatekeep who can be who can belong
Mm-hmm.
in the people of God.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Um, and I say this often, and something that I'm holding my own self to
Hmm.
um, is, we talk a lot about, and this is, we have these meetings, Wes and I, before we do the podcast, and we have a general sense of what we're going to talk about, but we never go into deep detail, and sometimes things come out right, on the spot, and this is one of those things. So I'm throwing you a curveball, Wes. Get ready for
Okay.
it.
I'm ready.
But I talk about this often. While you're talking about being grafted in, we talk a lot about life, and it's a good thing.
Mhm.
We talk about primarily life in the womb,
Mhm.
and then we'll kind of throw in life um, at the end, towards the end of it.
Mhm.
But all the way through it, there's a whole most of your life is lived before or
Yeah.
after the womb and before you're in hospice.
Mhm.
And I think there's so many times where we disregard these kind of like life issues in between. And talk about being grafted in, uh, you know, there are children, tons and tons of children who need good homes
Yeah.
and are not being grafted into families that can take them. Now, I can understand not every family has the capacity, but
Mhm.
a lot more do.
Mhm.
If we begin to rethink about how we go about our lives, absolutely a lot more do.
Yeah.
And if we bring it back to the church, what we're talking about, a lot more churches have capacity to graft in more people if
Mhm.
we change the way we think about things.
Yeah.
If you look in like Luke 14, Jesus is telling a parable of like a great banquet, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And he's talking about the people who would be invited and all this other kind of stuff. And then people decide they didn't want to come,
Yeah.
right? And so what then does the master of the banquet do? Go out to the highways and the hedges and highways, and
Mhm.
compel them to come. And who are these people? People who weren't actually in the in club, so to speak.
Right.
People who are on the outside, in the margins.
Mhm.
For us, people who started out in the margins, like Wesley said, people who were not originally in God's family, God's chosen people, we need to be at the forefront of getting people at the margins. And so, I guess one of the questions that would come to me, I think, is, okay, so if this is something that is uh, vital for us, who are those people at the margins?
Right. Mhm.
I tend to think, I mean, obviously, there's this idea of class, whether it's poverty, stuff like that. But
Mhm.
then I also think about race.
Mhm.
I also think about people who may be in the same race but don't share the same, belief systems. I think about the quote unquote nerd or the geek,
Mhm.
like people who it's like, oh man, I don't have anything in common with this person, but
Yeah.
guess what? They need Jesus too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the person that can't carry a conversation can't be. I mean, and you might find this hard to believe, but I, uh, for most of my life, was that quiet, awkward, like kid that couldn't get to know people because I was so afraid of saying the wrong thing that they would talk like I couldn't make eye contact. I couldn't yeah, I just didn't have the confidence enough to get to know somebody. And honestly, one of the reasons I am a Christian today is because somebody came to me and invited me over and said, "Hey, like let's be friends. Um let's read the Bible together and let's uh you know, play games in the yard." And through developing that friendship, um that's what softened me because ultimately I had a lot of sort of um hang-ups about Christianity that I think had a lot of cultural baggage with it, and that friendship helped me see um just a true affection and a true love. And I think really learn we can really learn about that, because ultimately I do think that we, like, if someone's going to come to faith, like I think it's important that we do make intellectual arguments, not because we want to be argumentative, but because there's a reasonableness to the faith that needs to be understood. I think because I had been having discussions with this friend and with others about the reasonableness of Christianity, before I was a Christian,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding that it had reasonable foundations helped me to get to that point. But we don't come to faith um, because it's right. We
Mhm.
don't we don't believe in Jesus because it's right. We believe in Jesus because of love, because he
Even though
loves
it is right.
us. Yeah, well, I mean, because but I don't. I think at the very heart of all of us, we don't necessarily care what's right. We care about what like feels good. Um,
Depends.
depends.
We're all
I mean,
different.
well, yeah, and I do think when we know something is right, we will have to go through the struggle of um dealing with that, like if it doesn't feel good.
Mhm.
But the thing that appeals to us is the guttural, is the um at the core of it. Like I understood that, and for like I understood the resurrection as not just logical, but the most likely option. My friend asked, "Well, what do you think about that?" I said, "Yeah, it makes sense, but I don't see why that matters. I don't see why it means anything to me. The only reason it means anything to me is because the resurrection isn't about Jesus saying, 'Hey, look, I'm God, worship me.' The resurrection is, 'Hey, I love you.'" So, yes, it's right. Yes, it matters that it's right. Yes, it matters that we honestly assess the rightness of it. But what really, really matters is that if it's right, that means God loves me. If it's right, Jesus loves me. And we all, as Christians, like, that's the message that we carry. The message we carry isn't, hey, God is real, therefore you have to worship him. The message is, like, God is real, therefore you know you are loved. Um, and it's that message of love. It's the good news. Like, what is good news? Is good news I have something that's true that means you have to do something? Or is the good news I have something um, that's true that, like, can help you where you are, that can meet you where you are and give you a place where you can belong?
Yeah, that's right. If right, because if the message is true, then it automatically elicits some kind of response. Now, the
Mm-hmm.
response could be apathy. The response could be rejection. The response could be wholehearted embrace. The response could be, tentative skepticism. There are all
Sure.
kinds of ways, but it elicits a response, right? When you believe like that this thing is true. Like one of my favorite apologists, he always asks the question. He says, if Christianity was true,
Mm-hmm.
would you believe? And you'd be surprised by how many people say no.
Right.
Well,
Well, I wouldn't.
you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Well, why? I mean, if it's true, well, why? Right? Because the difference is like kind of what you're saying is
Mm-hmm.
the difference is when God captures your heart, that's something different than just mental assent,
Yeah.
uh, which we need to get into. But yeah, but once once you get to this place where you realize like God loves us. Like he showed it through the cross. He
Mm-hmm.
showed it when he got up the third day. He showed it when he went around and did all these awesome things. He showed it when he turned a sinner like
Mm-hmm.
me
Yeah.
around and he loved me in spite of being unlovable.
Yeah.
Uh, then my response just kind of has to be like out of, and it's not out of guilt, it's not out of shame. It's the same thing with
Mm-hmm.
evangelism, right? It's
Sure.
not because I feel like this heavy burden I have to do this stuff. No, it's because I love Jesus so much. I'm willing to treat other people with dignity
Mm-hmm.
and respect and humanity, and invite them to come worship the Lord with me and show them the same thing that I was showed myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's, Jesus showed prostitutes
Yeah.
love and respect.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus showed tax collectors. Now, for those of you who don't know, tax collectors in that day were not liked people. Though,
It's
I,
not much different than today.
If any of you who are listening, first we lost our monocle people.
That's right.
Now we lost our tax
Now we
collector.
lost our tax collectors.
It's crazy.
Oh,
But tax collectors, they were despised not just because they were tax collectors, but because they were tax collectors for a foreign government,
mhm,
and they were being like essentially invaded by, and
mhm,
not only that, because they're being occupied, and so like we're being occupied, and now you're charging us for being occupied. That's the first thing. Then the second
yeah,
thing is they would take more money
off the
than
top,
was
yeah,
necessary. So how they made their money was they Rome would say, okay, charge them $5 a month. Well, how they would make their money is that like they would charge $6 or $7, whatever it is. But then many of them charge way over that because they were just trying to get rich off the people. And the people realized, wait a minute, you don't even have to make all this money off us.
right,
But these are the kind of people that Jesus dined with because salvation is for everybody,
mhm,
right?
yeah,
For everybody who believes in the Lord, you can come to Him,
yeah,
particularly the people who are in the margins. Because I can tell you,
that's right,
uh, little Zacchaeus, there's a guy in the Bible um,
mhm,
who swindled some people out of their money. I can tell you, he was at the margins.
yeah,
But when Jesus saw him and he was convinced that there's something different about this man, Jesus said, or Zacchaeus said, I'm going to give back all that I owe plus more.
mhm,
And so, again, for us who are made, not only made in his image, but like being formed more and more in the likeness of Christ, out of the outpouring of our heart, it, it almost feels like, and I told this same thing last week, so I'm not going to go over the story again, but like, when you get the birds and the bees, or not the birds and the bees, wait a minute, we're going to a different place. When you get the butterflies, is what I'm trying to say.
that's
The
right.
butterflies. First, we lost
First, that's right.
our monocle people. Then
Then
we
we
lost.
lost the tax collectors. Now we're losing parents that have to give the talk.
Right. Leslie, we're losing them left and right.
That's
You know,
right.
you're gonna have to find a new partner soon. um, but yeah, when you get those butterflies in your stomach,
Mhm,
about oh, hey, this girl is cute or this boy is cute and all this other kind of stuff, and you can't help but telling your family and your friends and all this other kind of stuff. Well,
mhm,
it's the same way. Like when you have this love of Jesus that's just welling up on the inside of you, you are drawn to people who seem like they're at the margins because you
mhm.
want them to have a family just like you have a family.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, really what Jesus taught. He said, don't, like when you throw a party, don't go out and invite people that you know that can pay you back. Invite the
Mm-hmm.
people that can't pay you back. Invite the
Mm-hmm.
people that, like, because how much greater is it to see somebody receive something they know they cannot afford,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, um, Christopher, if you gave me, uh, like, well, actually, I can use this proper example. You bought a meal for me while you were visiting, and it was very kind. I was very appreciative of it. Um, at the same time, I could afford to buy myself a meal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, um, there's a level of appreciation, like there's a cap on my appreciation almost, of like, well, thanks, like, it's
Mm-hmm.
really kind of you. That's a good sign of our friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if you bought me the restaurant, you know, and just said, "Hey, this whole place is rented out for you. Like, come here whenever you want, eat
Mm-hmm.
as much as you want,
Mm-hmm.
and don't worry about it. I've got it covered."
That's right.
Like, that is beyond my comprehension.
That's
And
right.
every time I go, every time, even when I'm not going, and I just think, "Oh man, I could go there." Like, what a crazy like concept that
Mm-hmm.
somebody would do that for me, and that's so
Mm-hmm.
far beyond what I'm able to accept. And sometimes buying a meal for somebody is that.
Mm-hmm.
um and sometimes inviting somebody to see a movie with you is that. Sometimes, like, just asking someone how their day's going is that, because there are people out there that have, because there's a social capital that we don't factor when we're talking about what we're spending and what we're giving.
Mhm.
Um, and I think attention and knowing somebody, the feeling of being known is something that, uh, it's hard to know how to pay that back.
Mhm.
And I think that's ultimately the gift of God, is to know. And Paul even writes like, oh, like to the day that we can know as even we are fully known,
Mhm.
is what we aspire to, um, and how we communicate that, uh, like matters. And I think it's also, do you want to be known? I have
Mhm.
so I
Mhm.
was going to a church, actually speaking of your pew seat story, I was going to a church, and it was a church I was attending. I was um and and this doesn't speak to the church as a whole, but
Mhm.
this is just a single situation that happened within the church. As I'm sure every church has stories of, and every single one of us has stories of doing similar things like this. But there was a guy that before church, I had gone to a restaurant to get something to eat. A guy was sitting outside, asked me for money, and I noticed he had like a grocery bag with those large cans of beer
Mhm.
in it. And so I was thinking, well, I don't really want to give him money, but I'm going into the restaurant. I can just invite him to come along. So he accepted, and I bought a meal for him, and we sat down and ate together. And since I was going to church, I said, "Hey, I'm going to church. If you want to join me, you know." And he accepted. He gladly accepted. So we went over to church. Um, Walked in, sat down, and he was a homeless man. So um, again, understandably disheveled. Um, had a scent about him due to just
Mhm.
lack of
Mhm.
clean water, ability to shower,
Mhm.
and he was a traveling man, and it was summer, so
Mhm.
but while we were sitting, um, during the sermon, he would lean over to me and do what he thought was whispering, right, making comments on things that the preacher was saying and stuff like that, and then but during this whole time, like after we had sat down, there were two ladies behind us. I noticed almost immediately, started kind of like, you know, uh, looking at each other, and I didn't think too much of it. But part way through the service, they actually moved. They got up, and having grown in their like of and showing their dissatisfaction with him, like throughout the time. Like it was to the point that I'm fully aware that they don't want him here. They finally just got up and, I'm assuming, moved seats, if not, whatever. Um, and I'm glad that he was invested in the sermon and actually like paying attention to what was, and that they were directly behind him. But how, like, um, but it's, and sometimes we do things that we think other people don't know to show our dissatisfaction or our disgust in some cases.
Mhm.
Um, I try to, you know, but I still think about that, and I still think about these ladies that um didn't encourage me to bring more people to church.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. Um, uh, because you're doing what you think is one of the safest things you can do, the
Hmm.
best things you can do for this man. Um, Bring him to a place where he can hear about Jesus,
Right.
and for him to have to, you know, because I'm sure if they were loud enough for you to hear him,
He
I'm
might have
sure they
been
were loud enough
ignoring
for
them. Yeah. Like,
yeah.
well, that's
I'm
another
sure,
thing, is he's probably, the reason he didn't react might just be because he's used to being treated that way.
right. Yeah, that's right.
I've had people like when they ask for money, if I don't have money on me, I said, "Hey, I'm sorry, man, I don't have any money." They've said I've actually been thanked for just saying that, for acknowledging them.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. That's tough. That's tough. Particularly when we're called to wrap our arms around these kinds of people, and not necessarily you know we're called to proverbially wrap our arms
Sure,
around
sure.
these people. You know
Receive
what I'm
them,
saying?
yeah. To
Yeah,
receive
to
these
receive them
people, yeah.
exactly. And for us to not is really tough. It's
Mhm.
really tough. It actually reminds me of a similar story, Wesley, that uh, of kind of rejection of sorts.
Mm.
I was at a boot barn not too long ago, actually. Uh, for those of you who are in YouTube land or radio land, wherever you're hearing this, so I'm from a big city, but I think I'm a cowboy. So I got boots and buckles and hat. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. But anyway, so I was at a boot barn, and these two cute older black women
Mhm.
were there shopping or whatever,
Mhm.
and so they had left the store. And when I left the store myself after I got my boots, I saw they were outside talking, and so I just struck up conversation. Hey, how y'all doing? All that.
Right.
So we were talking, and then one of the women said to me, "You're a Christian." I said, "Yes, ma'am." And we talked a little more. She said, "You're a preacher." I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "Well, where's your church?" I said, "Well, I'm the church up the street, so and so, so and so forth."
Mhm.
And so they kind of like looked at each other and said, "Yeah, we've been there before." I said, "Oh, well, how was your time there?" She said, "Oh, well, this was some years ago, and we just didn't feel invited." So there's a part in our service where um, we we pass the peace, right?
Right.
So we
Right.
stand up and we shake each other's hands as a symbol of reconciliation before we come to the Lord's
Mhm.
table.
Mhm.
And so they said that they literally looked all around them, and no one would even look them in the eye or shake their hands.
Oh wow.
Now, this is a church a church where I serve.
Mhm.
What that did to me, it a couple things. One, it enraged me.
Sure.
Two, it saddened me
Mhm.
that even at this point in our history together, that there would still be in one of our churches women who would not be received, looking around to be received,
Right. Like seeking,
presumably,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, seeking to be received, presumably because of their skin. I can't think of any other reason.
Sure.
I mean, they were very well dressed. I mean, they were coming from Boot Barn like I was, so they were well dressed.
So they're wearing good clothes.
I know they're wearing good clothes, and they were just totally ignored.
Mhm.
I was
Mm.
I was mortified. I was mortified. And so we spoke some more after that and kind of encouraged them and all that other kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
you can tell that the damage had been done.
Yep.
And how many times has that happened? I think in any of our
Mhm.
churches, not just in our communion, but in others all around the world, right? Where people who are the other, right? Whether
Sure.
they're a different skin color, whether they're a geek, whether they're from maybe they can have the same skin color, but they're a different ethnic group within the same
Mhm.
skin color, and
Yeah.
they're being rejected simply for that, and they're
Mhm.
not being seen the way Jesus sees them.
Yeah.
Tough.
Yeah, it is tough, especially because I mean, ultimately, the church is meant to be the place of reconciliation. It is
Right.
like we've been charged with the ministry of reconciliation,
That's right.
and especially if the church is the body of Christ, is the presence of Christ on earth, and Christ is the embodiment of God, and God is the refuge that we flee to from the storms of this life. we should at least be reflecting in part that refuge, right?
That's right.
Like we should be a place where people can go and be like, "Oh, this is a safe place to be. This is a good place that I can be." And not have to worry about all these external factors that I usually have to worry about getting in the way of, being loved.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Um, so we need to learn as like if we, if we are like if Jesus is using us to be um the refuge, we need to learn how to have tangible ways, right, to invite the stranger, the other, the
Mm-hmm.
marginalized, to worship us, right? Because that's all. I mean,
Worship
that's
us.
what did I say? Worship us.
I think you might have said worship us. I know what
Was
you mean.
that was Wesley? Now I don't know much about psychology. Is that what you call a Freudian slip?
Yeah, maybe. It didn't have to do with your parents, but yes, it might be what they call a Freudian slip. I don't think. Oh no, now we're about to lose the Freudians. I
Like first,
don't think it necessarily has a basis.
we're racking them up. At
Right.
this point, only a pair of shoes are listening to us.
That's right. Only a pair of boots,
Uh,
specifically boots. Um, which is funny because this is a episode about welcoming all, welcoming people.
That's right. That's right. And we're just left and right,
That's
left and
right.
right. They're dropping like flies. But yeah, so I mean, I guess kind of like my last thing is we just need to figure out how to do this in tangible ways, right?
Hmm.
And to me, it seems like the most tangible way is to take like an honest interest in people,
Sure.
and have compassion on them and befriend them, right? Because oftentimes with people, sometimes we get in this mode where we have this kind of combative Christianity
Hmm.
where we're just, trying to beat people down with the truth.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter is, many Christians who are who become Christians as, teens, adults, whatever, they become Christians because they first became part of a community,
Hmm.
as opposed to, oh, I believe now I'm going to be a part of a community. In many, many, many cases, the overwhelming amount of cases, they're part of community first,
Hmm.
and they come to love and love this community,
Right.
and then they begin to grow more and more in the Lord.
Well, and ultimately, like you need a community to continue to believe, because a lot of that is not just the encouragement of being around people, but having a place you can go to ask questions honestly.
Mhm,
If I feel like I can trust the people around me to ask these questions that I might have, without feeling shame or guilt for having them,
mhm,
um, I'm more likely then to like have an honest conversation with them,
mhm,
um, and to trust, knowing their character, that God is good even if I'm still kind of struggling with
mhm,
this doubt, this unknowing within me. As you referenced with the, man going well, this I think might be a different story, but the man going asking for his daughter to be healed or whatever.
mhm.
He says, "Lord, I believe, heal my unbelief."
Help my unbelief. That's right.
Yeah. But
Good, Wes. Well, we solved the world's problems yet again.
yet again, every episode a new world problem and a new group of people with specific interests that we are pushing out from our audience. Um, we apologize. If you like monocles, go buy a monocle. Uh, if you know, I don't know, all the other things that we talked about
All the,
that you can
all
do.
of the things. All of the
All of the
things.
things. Look, we're all things in common. If you know someone that likes monocles, go buy them a monocle. Do you like monocles, Christopher?
Buy a marginalized person.
A monocle. There we go. That's the answer.
It may work.
It
You
might.
know, you never know.
Uh, so speaking of a need for belonging, and how the church can be a community. Next week, we're going to be talking about the topic of being of singleness in the church, how the church talks about singleness, and how it talks about marriage, um, coming from the perspective of two guys that are not married. So, I'm not going to assume to be able to speak on behalf of married people. But I
But
can
can you speak as a single guy?
I can speak as a single guy.
That's what we need.
That's what we need. So tune in next week if you're interested in that conversation. As always, you can reach out to us at allthingsincommonpodcast@gmail.com. And the more interactions we get on social media, the more chances we will actually do things with social media. So
That's exactly right.
all links in the description of this video. I hope everyone has a great week, and thank you for
And don't
tuning in.
forget to like, share, subscribe. That's what all the YouTube.
Oh yeah, like, share, subscribe, hit alerts,
Hit that
and
bell right
hit
here
yeah.
or right there, wherever the bell is. I
I
don't know
am
where.
not gonna put the yeah,
If
not
you
that
see that
far in
bell,
my.
hit it.
That's right. More views on YouTube means I will actually maybe do some post editing on these things.
Hmm.
It's an idea.
And let's say if we get to, let's say, 100 views,
Hmm.
maybe we'll put a bell there.
Oh yeah.